that these first Christian communities, they were defined by four different things, these four simple and clear activities. They were defined by a devotion to the apostles' teaching, a devotion to fellowship, a devotion to prayer at the temple, and a devotion to breaking bread together. Life together for these first Christian communities, it was rooted in the practice of these four things. They defined them. It defined their faith. It was how they sought to embody the life and light of Jesus Christ for the world around them together. So the first thing we recognize is that they were focused on searching after and growing in the knowledge and love of God through the daily reading of holy scriptures and holy texts. They were also attentive to the teaching of the apostles, which means they were paying attention and couldn't get enough of the eyewitness accounts that the apostles had to share of Jesus' firsthand experience of public ministry. And so you picture these interconnected networks of these small Christian communities scattered all throughout the city. And as these traveling preachers, as these traveling apostles were moving from one city to the next, it's like they couldn't wait to hear of the next story, the next account, the next teaching that they shared of their experience of Jesus' public ministry. And when the traveling preachers weren't in town, they would be waiting anxiously to receive a letter or an epistle from Paul or Peter or Timothy or all of these different kinds of apostles. And they would be waiting to receive that letter. And the second it arrived on town, I imagine how excited they would have been to hear from these preachers, to hear from these apostles, to receive their teaching. And then they'd go to pass that letter, to pass that epistle from one group to the next, forming this rhythm of life together. So one of the things we recognize about these first Christian communities, they were attentive to the reading of Scripture and to the teaching of the apostles, growing in the knowledge and love of God. But what's more is that they were also attentive to sharing life together. They were attentive to one another, to building community. The word that Luke uses to describe what it means to share life with one another is a Greek word, koinonia. And koinonia points to a fellowship or a close mutual relationship, a participating in or sharing in, partnership, contribution, or gift. Koinonia was a well-known phrase in Greek philosophy. It indicated friendship or fellowship. And one scholar notes, Robert Wall, he explains that koinonia was a fellowship of believers who shared more than common beliefs and core values. They displayed a desire to care for one another's spiritual and physical well-being as a community of friends. This is what these first Christian communities were. They were communities of friends. Even though they were relative strangers, even though they had a variety of backgrounds, these different kinds of diverse origins and languages and experiences, they gathered together and cared for one another like friends. In this way, these koinonia groups, these early Christian communities, they pointed to a reality that really was an embodiment of the kingdom of heaven. They were living life in such a way where these diverse individuals were coming together as one. Regardless of their differences, there was no division. They were bound together, caring for one another as though they were friends. And I love how Acts describes what this looks like. And what it looks like is that everybody was treating each other as though they had equal access to God's provisions. Nobody was entitled to more. Nobody was entitled to less. Everybody had equal access to everything that God had to offer. There was equity amongst their diversity. And so what happened was they began to live this kind of way. They would give to one another as anybody had need. And with this kind of worldview, as they were sharing in God's economy, they had margin and they had capacity to then go meet needs of everybody in the community. And so they did a lot of good. So much good that people started to take notice because of how they were meeting the needs of the people surrounding their little small group community. And I love what Luke says about that awe came upon everyone because many signs and wonders were being done by the apostles and having the goodwill of all the people. So day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. They weren't bound by the trappings of material wealth. They were instead freely giving as anybody had need, caring for one another as this community, this koinonia of friends. And people could see what was happening. They were drawn to it. One of the hallmarks of these first Christian communities was their desire to care for one another, to love one another like friends.